Good evening and welcome everybody to this community information session where we'll be talking about minimum lot size dual occupancy dwellings in Ku-ring-gai. I'd like just to explain how this is going to work this evening. So the session will comprise of two main sections. The first will be a presentation, and this will be done by my colleague Craig Wise, who is the team leader of urban planning here at Council. Craig will go over the information about the project and answer some of the commonly asked questions that we've been receiving over the past few weeks. And then it's over to you. We have the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, and you are welcome to post your questions in that Q&A box. Now, with the Q&A, if you can try and keep them general rather than very specific about your property or a property that you know, because getting to that kind of detail in the forum like this can be problematic and it can take a lot of time. So if you can please keep the questions general. We aim to be finished here by 7:30, and please note we're recording this session and we will be posting it on our website as soon as possible. Also, with the questions and answers, we'll be looking at summarizing everything that we're hearing, and we will be putting this on our website in the next few days as well, so that hopefully we can address the vast majority of queries that we're coming from the community. Now, if there are things that we do not address, you can, of course, write to us afterwards, but we can talk about that later on. So what I'll do, I'll hand over to my colleague, Craig, to run you through the presentation. Again, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen, post your questions, and hopefully by the end, we'll have been able to answer most people's questions. So I'll hand over to you, Craig. Thank you.
Thanks, Will. And thank you, everybody, for spending time tonight to have a look at this presentation, and hopefully I can provide a better understanding of what Council's seeking feedback on. Okay, so what are we doing here tonight? What are we asking the community about tonight? Council has developed two options for a minimum lot size for dual occupancies. There's options A and option B, and these have been outlined in extensive detail on our website, and hopefully everyone's had a chance to look at that. There are no other variables we're seeking feedback on. It's really a preference for option A or option B, as both these two options meet the requirements from the New South Wales government in terms of providing these controls. So what we will do is asking you to fill out a survey. It's probably the easiest way to let us know your views, or make a submission directly to us on your preferred option. Okay, let's start by looking at what is a dual occupancy. Dual occupancy is a planning term that refers to two dwellings that are developed on the one parcel of land. They can either be detached dual occupancy, so two separate dwellings sitting apart, or they can be attached dual occupancy, where the two dwellings share a common wall or sit above each other. These are quite often called duplexes. Okay, what does minimum lot size mean? When we're referring to the minimum lot size, we're referring to what is the minimum size of a parcel of land that can be developed for a dual occupancy. And generally, if the land doesn't meet the minimum lot size requirements, then you cannot do a dual occupancy on that land. Now, the minimum lot size is a fundamental planning control for dual occupancy, because what it does, it determines that there is sufficient area of land to deliver both the two dwellings on the one side, but also achieve other desirable development outcomes, such as landscaping, tree retention, allowing for further plantings, maintaining the character of a streetscape, and also where the land may be in a heritage conservation area, being able to respond to those heritage issues on the site. As I said, the public exhibition is looking at two options for minimum lot sizes, A and B, and we're seeking your comments and feedback on both those and your preference on one or the other of those. Okay, why are we doing this now? Back in February last year, 2024, the state government announced their low and mid-rise planning reforms, where they were seeking to override local councils' planning controls and allow the development of a large quantity of additional housing and different types of housing to deal with the housing crisis. In July last year, the government rolled out their first element of that, and that was to allow dual occupancy development on all R2 zone land within New South Wales, and this included Ku-ring-gai. Now, Ku-ring-gai was one of 13 councils across the state that didn't currently allow dual occupancy in its R2 zone, and therefore had no planning controls for dual occupancies, and most importantly, doesn't have a minimum lot size control for dual occupancies. What the government did at the time, though, it did allow council time to develop its own controls, and at the time they've turned off all complying development provisions under the state policies that would allow people to lodge a complying development for dual occupancy until such a time council had its minimum lot size control in place. However, they will be switching those complying development controls back on the 1st of July this year. Hence the urgency of getting this fundamental planning control into place before the complying development controls are switched back on. And as I said earlier, the minimum lot size, it says, is fundamental to planning for dual occupancies, as it really does set that look and feel, or the ultimate outcomes, planning outcomes you want to retain local character, and particularly maintaining the landscape character of Ku-ring-gai. So as I said, the government has given us until March 2025 to submit a proposed minimum lot size control, and that will allow them time to get the necessary legislation drafted to implement that control before they switch on the complying development controls back on the 1st of July. Okay, what's the challenge here? As residents of Ku-ring-gai, you know what the underlying character and qualities of the area are, and what would be seeking to maintain in planning outcomes. Obviously, dual occupancy is a much more dense form of housing than detached housing we currently have. So the challenge is to allow a certain degree of dual occupancy within the LGA, but also retain some of those valued elements of our local area, such as the tall canopy trees, such as the streetscape and the various elements of a consistent built form, and also the public domain itself, as more dwellings results in multiple driveway crossovers, compromises not only street parking, but also street tree planting. So the challenge is to come up with a series of plan controls that will deal with those issues. Okay, we have developed two options. To do that, we engaged architect and urban design consultants Hill Palace to investigate a number of elements and come up with what they saw as the optimum minimum lot sizes within the area. So they investigated the existing or the new requirements within the state government's planning controls, looked at different ways of achieving the state government's requirement that we should be allowing at least 50% of councils' R2 lots to be developed for dual occupancies, but also at the same time coming up with an optimum minimum lot size which would allow retention of those key elements, again, the trees, the biodiversity, maintain local character, but still allow for sufficient levels of dual occupancies. Now, that study they undertook is part of the exhibition material on our website, so you can look at the detail behind that and the information that we've covered to come up with the minimum lot size. And it's also was attached to the council report back in December. So once again, what we are now doing during this exhibition is seeking your feedback on those two preferred options, A and B, and providing further information for you to make an online survey or a written submission. Okay, while the state government have allowed dual occupancy on all R2 land across the state. There are some exclusions to that. Within Ku-ring-gai, those exclusions include areas with bushfire risk. Also, they aren't permitted on sites, R2 sites that are heritage items, and also they're not permitted within the transport-orientated development areas, or the TOD areas, around within 400 metres of Roseville, Lindfield, Killara and Gordon stations. Okay, now let's run through the options. Okay, option A is looking at having a single minimum lot size that applies across Ku-ring-gai. That would allow 50% of the sites to be developed. Okay, and through the work of Hill Fellas, that has determined to be a minimum lot size of 1,015 square metres with a minimum lot width of 18 metres to apply to all lots. The lot width is important because it allows a proper consistent streetscape and allows sufficient width and setbacks on sites to provide deep soil landscaping and the planting of trees and decent outdoor open spaces on that site. When it's narrower than 18 square metres, that becomes a little bit more problematic to achieve. Okay, also the large size, once again, does allow for that greater ability to plant out the tall trees and the landscaping and maintain a more consistent local character and streetscape. The negatives of having an area applying across the whole LGA means that there are areas further away from centres and services which will allow the extra dwellings and obviously would rely on a greater reliance on private car usage to get to those services and to transport. So that's option A. Option B is a little more detailed, where we're actually allowing for 2 different minimum lot sizes depending on the location of your property. Generally across the whole council area would be 1,075 square metres, except around 5 identified neighbourhood centres, where we will proposing that we would allow a minimum lot size of 700 square metres within 400 metres walking distance of those neighbourhood centres. So the 5 centres we have identified are Hampden Avenue in North Wahroonga, Eastern Road and Princess Street in Turramurra, Kendall Street in West Pymble and Wellington Road in East Lindfield. But once again, both options, for the 1,075 square metres and the 700 square metres, both would require a minimum lot width of 18 metres in those lots. Okay, the positives or the benefits of this type of approach is that it does allow a smaller minimum lot sizes within the 400 metre walking distance of those key neighbourhood centres, which would allow people to walk to services and shops. And are also close to bus routes around those centres. And it does allow the slightly larger 1,075 square metres across the rest of Ku-ring-gai. The negative aspect of the use of the 700 square metre land size around the shops is that there will be an impact on tree canopy with the denser housing, and the streetscapes of these centres would undergo a considerable change to what there is at the moment. So that's the 2 options. In addition, as part of the planning reforms from the state government, the allowance mid-rise reforms also seeks to introduce dual occupancy controls within what they have identified as local housing areas. In these areas, those controls would allow a minimum lot size of 450 square metres. Now, we don't have the final details of the local housing areas or any indication of when they will come into effect. So what information we have up there is what we know to date, or what we've been told to date from the state government on their sort of dual occupancy controls within their local housing areas. Generally, they will apply within 800 metres of the main railway stations, and also within 800 metres of the edge of the one zone around some of the our 4 larger centres of Linfield, Gordon, St Ives and Turramurra. But as I said, it's hard to provide exact details on whether properties are in or out of these areas because we still don't know the final makeup of that. Okay, so things we don't know, as I just said, we don't know the extent of those local housing areas, so we're really not in a position to comment on whether a particular property will be in or out of those particular housing areas. Also, what we don't have is information of what our detailed planning and subdivision controls will be for dual occupancies within our areas outside of local housing areas. As I said earlier, the fundamental control for dual occupancies is that minimum lot size control. Once we have bedded that in, we can then look at what are the appropriate planning controls to go along with that minimum lot size. That will include developing things as subdivision controls, and other detailed controls such as setbacks, landscaping controls, and the like. And that work will need to be done between now and hopefully July this year. So once council adopt the minimum lot size, we'll then be put to work to develop the more detailed planning controls around those dual occupancies. And that, of course, will include further engagement with the community. Okay, where to from here? Our next step is when the exhibition closes on the 20th of February, we'll obviously need to go through all your submissions and the survey results and prepare a final report to council with a recommendation on what should be that final minimum lot size control. And everyone who makes a submission or takes part in the survey will collect your contact details, and you will be notified of when that meeting's on, and you'll be provided a link to the final report on the exhibition. Okay, following that meeting, once council makes the decision, we will then provide that information to the state government to draft the various legislation to implement that control. And then, as said, in July 2025, the government will then switch back on the complying development controls for dual occupancy. So once again, what we're asking you to do is simply provide us information on your preference of which of the two options you would like council to pursue. So complete a survey or send us a written submission and let us know of your preferred option. There's a QR code there that you can use to follow to that the information on our website. Okay. Moving on, to date, we've had an exhibition for a couple of weeks now, and we've been getting a number of questions either via the website or through phone calls to council. So I thought I'd just go through a couple of common questions that we're getting, and hopefully this will answer a number of questions you may have tonight, especially if people are asking the same question. So one of the key questions is, why have we only chosen 5 of the neighbourhood centres in option B? And there's a range of reasons for that. We have about 14 neighbourhood centres in total. However, there are a number of neighbourhood centres with constraints. First of all, there are a few which don't have any R2 zoned land around them. And there are also others which have a considerable bushfire risk nearby them, or once again, areas of evacuation risk for bushfire purposes. So we wanted to stay clear of adding too much extra density within those centres. And there are a few centres which our local strategic planning statement has identified as for potential future upzonings. And these are some of the centres on the main transport routes, particularly along Mona Vale Road and Babbage Road, where moving forward, they may actually have greater density, and by putting dual occupancies in or more dual occupancies in at this stage, then that will prevent the viability of future development around those centres. Another common question is, here's my address, can I do a dual occupancy development on my site? Unfortunately, we're not in a position to provide detailed advice on individual properties. Really, we're only asking for feedback on the two options of minimum lot size. We don't know the local housing area, so we really can't provide advice on whether or not a property will be in the local housing area until they have actually been finalised by the government. And if you're around one of the neighbourhood centres or close to a local housing area, then the best way to work out is, I said, it's a walking distance, and usually the case when you lodge a development application, then whether or not you're in that 400 metres or 800 metres will be determined on a case-by-case basis. Another key question, does the minimum lot size to the land, does the minimum lot size apply to the land before the dual occupancy or after the dual occupancy development? And the minimum lot size actually applies to the size of the land before you do the dual occupancy. So what we call the mother lot. So it's one parcel of land on which you put two dual occupancies. And once that has dual occupancies in place, then there will be mechanisms to allow the subdivision of that land post the development of the dual occupancy. Another common question is, why have we gone so specific on our 1,015, 1,075 metre options? Well, this comes back to the work of our consultant with the requirement that we provide 50% of our lots to be eligible for dual occupancy, and crunching the numbers and taking out the exclusions, that's where the numbers rounded out at. So both options do provide for more or less the same number of dwellings, just that the 1,000 we're allowed to, we have the ability to go to the larger 1,075 square metres by allowing more around those 5 neighbourhood centres at a smaller rate, but it still averages out in both options at the same number of lots will be eligible to do dual occupancy. So that's the main questions we've gone through. So probably hand back to you now, Will.
Thank you very much, Craig. Hopefully you found that presentation enlightening. Now, we've had quite a few questions come through, so please continue to provide them. As I mentioned earlier, please try to keep them general, because the more specific they are, the more difficult they are to address. So I'll go through as they've been received. Now, I've noted that there are some multiple questions in there from certain people. We'll try and address these as we go. Some of them may require us to come back to you later because they are quite specific. But I'll start with Colin, as he was first in at 12 minutes before we even started. So Colin's question, and Craig, I hope you can probably answer this. Hi, if the 800-metre circle covers my front yard but not the entire land, are we still classified as a local housing area? Craig.
I said the details around the local housing areas haven't been finalised. From what we understand, it will be a walking distance. So you'd measure from either the station or the edge of the one zone, depending on what centre you're in. And it'd be a walking distance from there to your front property, the front of your property. But as I said, those details are yet to be finalised by the department, so I can't give a definitive answer on that.
Okay, thank you. Now, Jonathan, you're asking about battle axe blocks. Would these be treated under either of the two? How would these be treated under either of the two options? Craig.
The intention is that battle axe blocks won't be eligible for dual occupancy. They would have to have that broader street frontage.
Okay, thank you. Another one from Colin, and this was before we even started. Very keen there, Colin. When can we know whether the property is classified as local housing areas and how? We don't know this, I don't think, yet. Craig, do we have any information from the state on that?
No, we're still waiting. They say soon, but that's been a while now. They've been saying soon. So
Okay, so it's somewhat in the air.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, Lee's asked a few questions. Some of these are quite specific. Can you see these questions, Craig?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So under the FAQ, Council has advised option A and B has been endorsed by the DPI. Could you please confirm when DPI endorsed the options prior to release of the survey? I cannot find any relevant reference to a meeting. I'm just thinking some of these questions, Lee, are quite long. So what we might do, perhaps, Craig, if you can quickly run your eye over this question and just give a response quite on high level. And Lee, what we'll do is we'll take these away and we'll get back to you specifically because you've asked quite a number of points. So, Craig, do you
Okay.
have any views on Lee's first question?
The first question, by the sounds of it, Lee has been following this quite closely. So
Yes.
be aware that our report to council back in December actually had 3 options.
Right.
With the resolution to go and seek feedback from the department on those options before we put them out to consultation.
Yep.
We had a meeting with the department in early January. They had a chance to review the 3 we put out. They deemed that the first option would not be satisfactory to them because we were seeking to override the controls they intended in the local housing areas.
Sure.
So they said they would not consider that one, but they were happy to consider the other 2. And that's why we went to exhibition with the 2.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Thank you for that one. Now, Lee has got another 3 questions, all of them quite specific. I'm just wondering if you could just give a high-level answer to Lee's 3 questions so we can get on with other people's questions. Lee, we will write you a response to these. It's just probably not the right forum now. So, Craig, do you have a view on these questions?
See, the 18-metre lot width, yeah, we'll probably have to get back individually to these.
Okay.
And certainly that question has come up a number of times, and
Okay.
we'll be confirming that when we report it back to council.
Okay. Lee, we do appreciate your questions. They are quite specific, but we have noted them and we will get back to you in the not too distant future. So please, we're not trying to not answer your questions, but in this forum, they're probably a little detailed. Fran has asked, "Hi Craig, will there be any impact towards subdivision, please?" Not sure what that question means, Craig.
What we'll be doing is developing subdivision controls. I said we really can't determine those until we know what the minimum lot size will be.
Yep.
Particularly if we went with option 2, then there'll be 2 different minimum subdivision controls. So all subdivision and all the other planning controls can be developed further when we actually know the minimum lot size because it is the fundamental control.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, thank you, Fran, for that question. John has asked, "What's the current minimum land size for subdivision?"
Across Ku-ring-gai, it actually varies. In the southern part of the LGA, it is around the 790 to around the 840. In the northern part of the LGA, generally north of Gordon, it's 930 square metres.
Thank you. If someone lodges a DA right now for a dual occupancy, what planning controls need to be considered when submitting such a proposal? For example, there are no council planning controls for dual occupancies. So,
yep, that's a fair observation.
Yep.
God, we don't have anyone from development regulation here, but it would have to be a purely merit-based assessment. There are controls in place for subdivision, but I really can't comment in detail on that as I don't actually work in the development assessment area.
Sure. Okay, no worries. Thank you. Bob, why was Todd and this not combined so we can address the housing issues together?
Good question, Bob. As I said, the lower mid-rise provides for an alternate housing form to the Todds. But that's a question for government.
Okay, great. Julian, are you leaning towards either of the 2 options at this stage, and/or has public feedback indicated a preference for A or B?
We really haven't analysed the feedback at this point, Julian. We're waiting for that. So us as council staff doesn't have an option. We're, as it really relying on what the public feedback is and then providing that to councillors to make the decision.
Great, thank you. Winton, with either option A or B, what percentage of the land can be occupied by the buildings?
So once again, that's at our next phase of working up those detailed controls about setbacks and site coverage and those other considerations.
Okay,
but we don't have information on that yet.
To be determined.
Yeah.
Okay, Guy, what pathways for compliant review exist if the lot size requirement is met with the width requirement falls short, say 16 meters rather than 18 meters? Is it possible for a dual occupancy to development to proceed? And who is the first authority for that decision?
Well, that would, because the minimum lot size width will be considered a development standard within the LEP, then there would be options to do a 4.6 variation, especially when it's close, and you need to demonstrate that through the development assessment process. Right. So that variation would be considered.
Would that be right?
Yes.
Right.
But there is a mechanism within the LEP for variations to development standards, okay, but it's considered through the assessment process.
Yeah. So Ben has asked 18 meters width related to frontage. Please confirm.
The 18 meters would be intended to be at the building line rather than the actual street frontage, and that's consistent with the way we currently measure lot width and the way the state government has included it within the housing SEP. Right. So okay, width at the building line.
Great, thank you. Christiane has asked, will option B result in less of Ku-ring-gai being subject to dual occupancy? Will dual occupancy be compliant development, and will subdivision occur at the DA or CDC application stage?
Both options have the same number of lots that would enable dual occupancy development, so that 50% target. The difference between A and B is that by having B and a concentration around those 5 neighbourhood centres, it means that the minimum lot size for areas away from those can be slightly larger and still meet that target. In terms of complying development, once again, they will potentially be subject to complying development in line with the state government SEP, but our minimum lot size will apply for complying development. Yep. And subdivision would need to go through a DA. We don't have details about subdivision at a CDC stage.
Right, so that's still to be determined. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Julian's asked another question. I would also like to know if dual occupancy is a compliant development. I think that's...
It is under the exempt complying development code, yep, the state policy.
Okay. Jennifer, other SEPs do permit additional development on heritage item sites in Ku-ring-gai and across New South Wales. Is there a rationale for not allowing dual occupancy on heritage items in your current 2 options for Ku-ring-gai?
That's the exclusion from the state government. The way dual occupancy has been drafted into the housing SEP, it outlines exclusions in that SEP, and it doesn't exclude items.
Okay. Right. Just sorry, my screen has just done something strange. Bear with me. Bob, another question from Bob. Instead of lot sizes of 450 square close to transport hub, 800s, why can't there be a low-rise apartments instead, so other areas without infrastructure, excluding heritage, etc.?
That is still an option under the state government's proposed low and mid-rise.
Right.
That there will be, as I said, that still hasn't been finalised.
Right.
But within the 800, there will be permissibility, from what they're saying, to do things such as townhouses and what they call manor houses or two-story flat buildings within the
Okay.
R2 zone within 800 square meters.
Right. Okay. And do we have an idea of when that information is going to be provided by the state, or is it still just pending?
We still haven't had any confirmation on when that's happening.
Okay, fair enough. Julian, existing road infrastructure is congested. What work is council planning to do to address the impact of additional population?
There's obviously we're currently undertaking work around the 4 Todd stations and traffic modelling there.
Yep.
Also, we're in the process of developing a new development contributions plan where we identify our infrastructure requirements going forward, including open space, community facilities, traffic and transport facilities, and then we look at the funding mechanisms for that. Keep in mind that all additional dwellings that are developed as part of dual occupancy will be required to pay development contribution towards that future infrastructure.
Okay, thank you. Now, JZ, exclusion area include bushfire-prone land. Does low risk level of bushfire allow dual occupancy? How do we know if our area falls in bushfire risk zone and therefore out of dual occupancy site?
The area would be mapped as bushfire prone land under council's bushfire prone lands map.
Right, so we have mapping for that.
Yeah.
And that's available on our website?
Yes, it is.
Great, okay. Sorry, one sec, my screen has done something strange again. Bear with me, please. Apologies. Jennifer has another question. You refer to 18-meter minimum lot width. Does this have to be consistent minimum lot width across the whole site? Some lots are irregular. So how do we address this?
Yeah, that's where we're referring to the intention. It would be at the front building line.
Front building
of
line.
The dwelling. Yeah.
Okay, great. What is the minimum lot width for land for dual occupancy? I think that's 18, but does this apply for both strata and Torrens titled subdivision?
As I said, the minimum lot size is for development. It's not related to subdivision. We're yet to develop our subdivision controls, so we won't be doing that until we actually have locked in the minimum lot size.
So we need the lot size first.
Yep.
Okay, fair enough. Winton has another question. It is difficult to consider this matter in isolation without some understanding of how issues related to the following will be addressed: water, sewage, electricity, other services, open spaces, and for supporting facilities, road congestion, parking, environmental impacts from significant loss of tree canopy, etc. I guess that's a kind of a comment there, Winton. Do you have
I suppose the only thing I would say to that, Will, is that the visibility of the dual occupancies is already in place. Now, the state government has allowed it.
Yep.
We are now catching up and responding and trying to get proper planning controls in place to deal with it.
Sure. So some of these issues would be issues anyway. We're just trying to improve them for the Ku-ring-gai situation. Right. Okay. Barry, would these be changes in the rules relation removal of trees? How would the environment be impacted by new dual occupancy designs? So I guess that's about loss of trees. Any thoughts on that, Craig?
That will be part of our planning control work. As I said, the whole goal here of having those large minimum lot sizes is to protect as many trees as possible and to allow substitute planting.
Right. So that would to reduce the impact of that.
Yeah.
Okay. Winton has another question. How and when will the above issues be addressed? So when?
Not sure what the above issues were.
Yeah. When is this happening? I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. In terms of the finalising the minimum lot size control will be in March, and then, as I've said, from there we will then work on more detailed development controls we can put in place to go along with that minimum lot size standard.
Right, thank you. Peter, can we extend the public exhibition deadline as many residents have just returned from holidays and do not know about the dual occupancy SEP?
Unfortunately, we're driven by the department's deadline, where we need to provide this information to them in March. So Once they have it, they then obviously need to approve it and draft the relevant legislation to have it in place by the 1st of July.
Okay.
So there is very little room to move on the time frame.
Yeah, this is a time frame which has been put upon us. We haven't selected the time frames ourselves. Okay, Harry, will the council provide dispensation for corner block site proposals that do not reach the minimum lot size by a very small amount, due solely to the exclusion of small cut-in on the corner, which enables car drivers to see around the corner?
Yeah, a detailed site issue. But as I said previously, if it doesn't quite meet the minimum lot size standard, then there is a mechanism within the LEP for a 4.6 variation of that lot size. In that case, those issues will be looked at and treated on merit.
Okay, so that's a merit-based assessment.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I don't believe that 50% of properties would be eligible under the dual constraint of lot width and lot size. I'll take that as a comment. Do you have any thoughts on that, Craig?
We'll be providing advice back to council. I said that question has come up, and we'll be seeking to demonstrate that more clearly when we go back. The work to date indicates that it should.
It should. Okay, great. Thank you. Michelle, can I knock down my HPUS in my house in a heritage conservation to build 2 detached or semi-detached houses?
Dual occupancies are permitted within heritage conservation areas.
Yep.
So it's not a no. We just need to obviously look at the impacts and undertake the necessary heritage assessment.
Yeah. For heritage items to be excluded, does it exclude heritage conservation area or only heritage listed buildings?
That's only the heritage listed buildings.
Only heritage listed buildings. Okay, thank you. Julian, another question from Julian. I would also like to know Harry's question about corner blocks. Yes, I think that's down to merit assessment. This is a slightly different one. Another one from Lee. How do you treat parallel road / dual street frontages?
Once again, that's a detailed control and something we'll need to consider as we develop those other planning controls.
Sure. John, what if all councils ask to keep things the same way as they are, offer no further options? What happens?
If we don't come up with a minimum lot size control, it will basically switch on a control that is currently in the exempt and complying development codes.
Yep.
Which would allow exempt development on lots above 400 square meters.
Okay.
Sorry, not exempt, sorry, complying development on lots above 400 square meters.
Okay.
And if they can't comply with the requirements of the code, then everything will need to be treated on a merit basis.
Yes, thank you. Ben, you refer to 18-meter minimum lot width. Does this have to be consistent minimum lot width across the whole site? Some lots are irregular. I think you've addressed this already, that it's the building. At
the front building line.
Front building line, okay. Will there be changes to roads, widths, drainage, sewer pipes, and all these changes? Very often these are ignored in the beginning. Residents then encounter flooding, even when with little rain.
Well, it's generally part of the development assessment process. We're looking at stormwater issues that may or may not result on sites, and right. There are existing provisions in place for dealing with stormwater on site.
Okay, so that will be done at a development assessment stage. Lorraine says she can't see the questions now. Judging by the fact people are referring to other questions, I think that may be an issue just for Lorraine. Please, Lorraine, just look at the Q&A and you should be able to see them. If you can't, can someone just comment at the bottom in the questions and I'll see what I can do to fix that up. Cheryl, will dual occupancy be compulsory once it comes into effect? Whichever option is decided.
No, it will be purely optional for the landowner.
Up to the landowner, okay. Can the council provide a map showing the lot sizes of each property? I guess because we don't know some of this yet.
That information should be available on council's online mapping where
Yep.
you can go into individual properties.
Yep. Okay. Okay. One sec. I'm just having troubles with my screen again. Bear with me. Sue, why was 18-meter frontage chosen over 20?
As I said, we had our consultants examine different layouts on different lot sizes and shapes.
Yep.
And the 18-meter frontage seemed to be about the sweet spot where you could still allow a sufficient number of lots, but still get better development outcomes or acceptable development outcomes.
Sure. Okay. Interesting question. Will either option A or B be enforced from July then? Can both be rejected by the government?
I really can't answer on behalf of the government on that
Yep.
one.
Yeah. Is it possible they could reject both of our suggestions?
They could.
Right. Okay. If public response is for a specific option, can council still elect another option? So do the council have to listen to the community, I guess, is the answer there. Question there.
Purely an answer for the council.
Yes.
We will report to council what the community is saying and what their preferred option is, and then ultimately it is for the council themselves to decide.
So your councillors are essentially your elected body to make this decision.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl, what happens to rates when these new plans come into effect? That's probably not a question you can answer, but any thoughts on that? That's that would be to be determined. Obviously, we operate under rate pegging, so unless things change, we are only able to change our rates as per rate pegging, which is set by the state. What's the additional requirement for HCA?
There are no additional requirements, but as I said, we will develop specific development controls for HCAs, and there may be variation to developing in non-HCA areas. Plus, there are also the existing requirements of a LEP for any development in HCA, whether it be a single house or a future dual occupancy or the like. So they will still continue to apply.
Okay. Sue's asked a question about, has council determined if all lots were developed with dual occupancy, what is the actual percentage of Ku-ring-gai that's impacted? What's the difference between A and B? So the level of impact between A and B across the whole council area.
As I said, it's the same number of lots.
Right.
That will be impacted.
Right.
Obviously, you'll have in option B, you'll have a greater impact around those 5 neighbourhood centres.
Yep.
But the offset would be that there would be less impact in the other areas because you have a larger minimum lot size and more ability to achieve the landscaping and the tree canopy retention.
Okay, thank you. Sue's just asked another question, and again, my screen's gone a bit weird. Will these rules override a convent on the land?
A covenant?
Yes, that's what I was curious as to if there was a convent anywhere in the area. So yes, a covenant.
No.
No. Okay. A question from Hay. Does the current minimum lot size apply for dual occupancy development? Is there a different for Torrens and strata title subdivision?
So we're looking at our existing controls, I assume that is.
Yeah.
So as I said, we don't have any different minimum lot size control for dual occupancy development at the moment.
Yep.
So I said it's still up in the air, a merit-based decision. We have existing subdivision controls, but they apply to existing lots, but not to dual occupancy. We will be developing subdivision controls for dual occupancies, and there will be obviously a Torrens option, and we will certainly investigate cases where you can't meet the Torrens option. There may be a strata subdivision option, but that's still up in the air.
Thanks, Craig. Honors asked, can land zoned R2 be extended to areas it does not currently cover on the map? So is there any chance that land will be rezoned R2?
That isn't on the table at the moment. There's no consideration of extending any or changing any zonings.
Okay. Barbara, what combined effect, if any, will there be when dual occupancy options are considered and blocks of apartments are also under consideration?
Well, that's an option for landowners. One of the areas that is excluded is in the TOD areas, which are currently zoned R2.
Right.
If there also is a potential conflict between the government's proposed low and mid-rise provisions, which will allow things like townhouses and two-storey apartment buildings within R2 zones.
Yep.
But otherwise, apartment buildings will generally be on land zoned R3 or R4, and dual occupancies aren't permitted within R3 or R4, so there won't be that conflict there.
Okay. Question, why not stick to the New South Wales government standard of 4 or 450 square metres and avoid costly delays? There are other ways of maintaining the environment standards in the Ku-ring-gai area.
The 400 and 450 square metres are incredibly small lots, and getting 2 dwellings on those lots of a habitable size leaves very little opportunity for any landscaping or setback. So it is a complete change in local character. Right. And you're more looking at areas in inner or middle ring holder suburbs where they have that much more dense subdivision patterns and much higher site coverage. So
and I guess on that there's also going to be a significantly higher impact on tree canopy as well.
Absolutely.
Right. Great, thank you. Why isn't there an option C which complies with the minimum size of state government dual occupancy guidelines? So I guess that refers to the previous question.
Yes.
Yeah. Another question from Colin. Is a conservation area being excluded by this dual occupancy? For example, if a property within conservation area meets all the requirements, can it develop dual occupancy?
Yes, it can.
Yep. Terry has just made a comment, just a comment on lot width. Trees will generally not be planted alongside new building development, so I cannot see that the proposed generous width requirements will enhance tree canopy. Okay, thanks for the comment there, Terry. Another question from Bob. Based on the number of households, people that we need to accommodate, can we create more TODs across the transport hubs and keep our current dual occupancy standards in poor infrastructure areas? I guess this is probably outside our remit because what the state government have put on us, isn't it?
That's correct.
So we're responding to what the state government has requested of us.
That's right. And as I said, the dual occupancies have been applied across the state, as Ku-ring-gai hasn't been singled out for this one. It's all R2 land within New South Wales.
Right. So it's for everyone. Okay, thank you. Question from Hay, are there any minimum frontage requirements for dual occupancy, or is it just based on minimum lot widths?
So that the width is based on the width at the front building line.
Yep. Yep.
So obviously the lot has to have a street frontage, hence not being included on battle axes.
Okay. Harry, neighbourhood centres, will the council also manage the transition boundary of the 400 metres perimeter by following planning principle 5, manage transition impacts? This principle was discussed in relation to TOD issues in the public forums. So any thoughts on that?
Probably the only thing I'd say there is that the transition from single dwellings to dual occupancies isn't significant. Dual occupancies generally will only have the same height control as a single dwelling.
Right.
So it could be a 2-storey dual occupancy next to a 2-storey detached house. Right. So there really isn't those transition impacts.
So it's not like a transition between a house and an apartment building.
Correct.
Right. Okay. Eddie, will there be any differences in the requirements for attached duplex and detached duplex?
I said we still need to to work out those controls.
Right. So that's to be determined.
But they're both permissible.
Right. Okay. Is it going to be Torrance title subdivision or strata title when subdividing the dual occupancy?
Once again, the intent would there would be the Torrance title option, but we're still working on those controls.
Okay. From Ursula, what happens if many dual occupancies in the area re-sewage issues? Is there a minimum number per block allowed?
No, it will be allowed on all lots, but as I said, issues such as sewage and stormwater would be dealt with through the development assessment process.
Right. Jay-Z, again, any chance to allow bushfire-prone land to be dual occupancy further down the track? So will that change in the future?
That would be an answer for state government.
Yeah. Bala, if property meets minimum lot size, does this mean that existing canopy trees within Sydney Turpentine Ironbark Forest can be removed as part of the dual occupancy complying development?
No, it won't. Existing tree removal provisions will apply.
Right.
And tree preservation provisions will apply, and existing legislation affecting EECs will still be in place.
Right. Okay. Is there legal action already underway on these changes? If so, why are we providing counter-offers?
There's no legal action on dual occupancy controls.
No. Okay. Why West Linfield Shops isn't included in the 400 meters distance from a shopping village?
West Linfield, that West Linfield Shops would be, I think, trying to recall it. I think that would be the reason of bushfire evacuation risk areas down in West Linfield.
Okay. Thank you. Jackie, would you agree most common lot in Ku-ring-gai are 900 square meters? If 50% is the ratio, is Ku-ring-gai confident we have over 50% over 1,000 land in Ku-ring-gai and that R2 and non-bushfire, etc.?
The Hill Fallis study did look at the whole range of sizes, keeping in mind that there are lots within the local housing areas down to 450, so including those as well, because they all have potential. And the areas outside of that, we can look at larger lots.
Yes. Okay.
And still meet the 50%. And all the data is within that study of Hill Fallis, which is available on our website.
Right. And I think broadly there, the lots the further north you go, broadly the larger the lots seem to get. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right.
Yes.
Okay, great. Another question from Hay. For dual occupancy development, does the subdivided land need to conform with existing minimum lot size?
No, we will be working on new minimum lot sizes for subdivision to match the overall lot size.
Okay. This is probably not a question we can answer. Is there a chance that the New South Wales government rejects auction A and B and enforces 450 square metre lots? I guess it's up to them, isn't it?
It's up to them, but in good faith, I wouldn't think they'd ask us to go through this process. And
yeah, we hope that's not the case, I think, is the answer to that one issue. Can we propose CDC application in HCA for dual occupancy?
No, you won't be able to. You'll need to do a development application for any dual occupancy in a HCA.
DA is required in the HCA.
Yeah.
Okay. John's asked, why is there no option C? I think we've answered that one, and I'm just about to sneeze. Apologies. So I'll get back to the questions though. Well, apologies if I jump out if I sneeze. John, why is there no option C? I think we just covered that. We haven't done that because we don't believe that will work in the Ku-ring-gai situation. So Hay has asked another question. Will there be any changes to floor space ratio for dual occupancy development? Currently FSR is 1 to 0.3 or 1 to 0.4. This may not allow sufficient areas for families.
once again, that will be reviewed as part of the next stage.
Franz just asked, could you repeat the current subdivision lot size requirements, please?
So you can look at them on online mapping. It's best. I can only give you a general rule of thumb. So generally, the northern part of the LGA, it's around 930 square meters. In the southern areas, it's smaller than that, but best to go and look at our online mapping and confirm it that way.
Would like to clarify that by 450 or 400 meter lot size, I meant that subdivided plot. In other words, 900 meter before the subdivision rather than 1015 square meters. I think I'll take that as a comment.
No, the actual minimum lot sizes proposed by the state government is 450 square meters before subdivision. So you're putting 2 dwellings on 450 square meters.
Right. Okay. Another question from Lee. Can you confirm that 50% target of 9613 include your requirements of 18 meter minimum lot widths?
I said we'll need to clarify that. I said the question has been raised. My understanding that it should, but we will go back and double check that.
Right. Okay. Question from Terry about lot width. How would the 18 minimum lot width at the building line help to enhance tree canopy? Isn't this just an arbitrary figure that has been selected because it looks good and is far in excess of the state government norm? Maybe a comment there, but any thoughts?
I said the lot widths were analysed within the Hill Palace study. And it's on the recommendation of that study we're using the 18 metres.
Okay. Another one from Jay-Z. Can there be dual occupancy for riparian land?
It's not an exclusion,
right?
But would be a matter of consideration in a development application.
Okay, so it'll be looked at the merit assessment. Okay. Fran, how long will the application take for dual occupancy applications in general? Will Ku-ring-gai recruit more team members to work on increased numbers of applications?
Yes, as I said, it'll be treated like any other development application, and we're always looking at resourcing issues from any of these sort of policy changes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, is there a link to the raw housing info, lot sizes and width in Excel or other formats? So do we have the information readily available?
All the base for the whole LGA? No, we don't. Obviously, we have that information available internally, but we're not in a position to share that publicly. There is, as I said, our online mapping tool on our website is probably the best way to start to get people to get a feel of those dimensions and those lot sizes.
Does the state government have a right to reject both of the proposals? And if so, what happens then? I think we've answered that, and it's a they could, but we are acting in good faith, and hopefully they don't. So, JG, does it have to be 2 separate detached dwellings or a duplex?
It could be either.
Okay. Now we'll just get to the last couple of questions, and if there's anyone who hasn't asked a question yet and would like to, because we have heard from quite a few of the same people, but if you've got anybody who hasn't asked a question, please post it now before we wrap up. It'd be great to answer your question. Another one from Fran. Will minimum lot size for dual occupancy higher than that of subdivision?
Trying to interpret that question. So the minimum lot size, what we're proposing is higher than the current subdivision requirements in our LEP. But obviously, we're looking at new provisions for subdivision of dual occupancy. That's got to align with the minimum lot size requirement to ensure that if you meet the minimum lot size requirement, you should then also be able to meet the subdivision requirements.
Yeah, fair enough. Lee, another one. Can the council still enforce the lot width under a CDC?
Yes, they will, because the wording in the SEP talks about minimum lot size provisions within an LEP.
Right.
And our LEP minimum lot size provisions will include both an area and a lot width component.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
yeah.
Okay, and Terry's asked the question again. You still haven't explained the case for an 18 minimum width. Why are you dodging this? Can't make the case for it. It should be opposed. Now, this was from our studies. Was that right?
That's correct. And it takes into a lot of considerations, particularly around being able to achieve appropriate dimensioned deep soil areas on a site.
Yep.
And as well as fitting dwellings of a certain size. But the details are within the Hill Fallis study.
Great. So
I'm sure Terry can dive into that. And
yeah, Terry, have a read of that, and if you have further questions after, you can come back to us. Is it 2 lot of 450 meters, which is 900 meters, or 450, which is 225 square meters?
Within the state government controls, it's the latter. So
The latter.
450 with 225 square meters.
Okay. And another for dual occupancy in Ku-ring-gai, will we mostly follow the SEP, or Ku-ring-gai will set new planning controls in terms of FSR height, setback, and etc. Will the DA and CDC follow different controls?
Okay. Well, there will be two sets of controls. There will be the controls within council's LEP. So what we're talking about here with our proposed minimum lot size. The state government will introduce controls for those local housing areas we're talking about. We have to see them. And in that case, they will be for DAs under the state provisions. So there'll be two different sets of provisions. The state's under the housing SEP, and for areas outside the future local housing areas, it'll be council's controls.
Sure. Okay, great. Okay, well, it looks like we've gone through all the questions. Now, I did mention earlier there was a couple of quite specific questions which have come through. I've just another question has just come in, but we will look to answer those in the next few days. But we just another question from Lee regarding lot width under a CDC CL 3B82 of the SEPs 2008 says differently. So Lee is disagreeing with the CDC issue. Perhaps that's something we can address later. Don't you have any thoughts on that, Craig?
The current wording of the CDCs under the SEP for minimum lot size, the wording is that it would be the minimum lot size for under any local environmental plan applying to the site.
Yep.
Or 400 square meters, whichever is the larger. The issue with us at the moment, we don't have a minimum lot size control.
Right.
So a CDC, and this is why they've turned it off and given us time to put one in. Once it's turned back on, and if we don't have a control in place, then the 400 under the SEP will apply.
Yep. Okay. Rick's asked a question. Current SEP can override local LEP lot width requirement, right? How does council introduce an 18-meter lot width?
As I said, the 18-meter control will be part of a minimum lot size control.
Yeah.
As I said, size applies to both area and width.
Yep.
So there'll be the two elements that would need to be satisfied.
Okay. Lindsay, the maps provided with two options in the website show all properties. Could council colour the areas which are available for dual occupancy? Now, do we have that level of detail yet?
We don't have that level of detail. As I said, one of the things we don't know the local housing areas, so we can't give definitive answers.
Right. Yes, there is some grey areas at the moment because of the lack of information from the state.
But I must say, but those maps identifying R2 land actually excludes things like heritage items and bushfire prone land.
Right. Okay. Great. So Lee was just referring to the previous comment. He was talking about lot width, not lot size. Maybe we can we'll take that as a comment for now, Lee. Jackie, for the 400 meters and 12-meter frontage DA only, that's only applicable to those who are either 400 to 800 meters to the station. Is this correct?
That's correct. That will be those areas within the state government's local housing areas.
Local housing areas. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Can you have more than 2 buildings on a larger block than 1,400 square meters within 400 meters of a neighborhood center?
Dual occupancy only talks about 2 dwellings.
Right.
People in the past have done multiple subdivisions,
Yep.
but once again, you've got to have that underlying lot of the size we're proposing before you can propose the 2 dwellings.
Yep. CC, can you elaborate on local housing area? What's the regulation on it? I mean, we have described earlier in the presentation that there is some we're still seeking some clarity around this from the state. But what are your thoughts on this question?
Yeah, it's a concept that the state government are seeking to introduce through their low and mid-rise housing reforms.
Yep.
So it's a term they've come up with and proposed certain controls. And that's where we're talking about those 400 and 800 metre walking distances around the stations and some of those larger centres such as St Ives.
Yep.
But we don't know the final details. We're not sure how they're going to map them. So it's really hard to confirm whether individual properties will be in or out of those local housing areas.
Right. Yep. That's still a bit little grey. Do the options that show red in the options map meet lot and size, lot width and size?
Not necessarily. I said that they are the R2 sites that aren't excluded.
Right. So they individual sizes, etc., aren't taken into account.
That's right. So that's not all the qualifying. This is just all the R2 land that could potentially be accommodate dual occupancy, but subject to meeting the minimum lot size and width.
Okay, so it's the map marks the zone, but individual properties within there may not meet that lot size requirement.
Correct.
Okay. With the proposal, will this impact or alter the house number? Ooh, this is a bit interesting question. I haven't really thought of this one.
Well, generally, when there's a dual occupancy put on a site, then it'll become 10A and 10B.
So the letters will come in. Okay. Yeah. The land is 1370 square meters and width around 40 meters. Can I do detached duplex? So you talk about a specific property there. Obviously, it depends where this is.
Generally, if it's a lot that doesn't exclude dual occupancy, based on that very information, yes, you would be able to do a detached dual occupancy on a site of that size and that width.
Right. Okay. Jimmy, can you remind us what the date when we will know which option Ku-ring-gai submits to the state government? Is that the March council meeting?
That's right. Yes, and if you've made a submission or filled in the online survey, you'll be notified of that meeting date beforehand.
So we'll let you know, and that will also have a link to various reports, etc. So this one is about corner blocks with 900 square meters within the local housing, over 25 meter frontage. Can I build 2 separate duplexes via DA if I meet the requirements with setbacks, etc.? It's quite a specific question. I'm not sure if you
really not in a position to answer that.
We can't really answer. That's too specific, I'm afraid. Sue's asked about, can you specify design requirements on these developments?
Yes, so that's the next phase where we'll be doing development control within our DCP for dual occupancies, and that will address all the design issues.
Great, thank you. Adam, why are you not providing residents the option to agree or not agree to the state government planning proposal?
I think we're past that point. It's in place. We have dual occupancies in place, so we're not in a position to object to that. In terms of the lower mid-rise reforms, we made a significant submission on that in February last year.
Yep.
So we have made our objections to that well known to the government.
Yep.
So we're still waiting for them to finalise it. So it's not as though we're standing back and doing nothing. That we, at the time when we were able to, we spent a lot of resources in responding to it and talking about the inappropriateness of some of what they are proposing.
Okay, thank you. Rick, have council got any chance to develop the stormwater control for dual locks? Does easement required for a low-sided lot?
I'd imagine that would be similar to existing single dwellings, but as I said, those elements will be addressed when we do those detailed planning controls.
Right, okay. I'm not sure with Adam to clarify I mean minimum lot sizes for dual occupancy. Take that as a comment, Adam. So I'm just going through. Yep. So what is the cost of ratepayers for all this work? Is the next question. Well, that's all this work is being undertaken within our planning team. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Craig.
I can't provide a direct answer to that.
Yeah.
But as I said, it's obviously it's work that needs to be done. It's
Yes.
work that's required of us by the state government. And where possible, we do as much work in-house. Like I said, we did engage consultants to do that really deep dive. Because they have the skills and resources we don't.
Great, thank you. Okay, I think that's all the questions addressed. Not sure if we met the 100, but almost 100 questions. So thank you very much for that. Now, what we will do is go through the questions we've received and we will group and theme them. We'll go through our Q&A on the website and add questions as required. We will also put a full recording of this session online. This will likely be done tomorrow. So we have recorded this. We do have to do a minor edit just to take the early parts off so that you have a nice concise video but it will contain the whole presentation, the full Q&A session, so that you can run through this at your leisure. You can also tell your friends about it who live locally and haven't been able to attend this evening. So people can have a really good look. Now, as Craig says, we're really looking for feedback, particularly on the two options. Feedback's open till the 20th of February. Again, the reason we have some tight timeframes is that we're having to meet timeframes that are put on us by the state government. So we will be putting a report to council hopefully in March, and that will detail our recommendation to council, and they will make the decision based on that. Now, I just have a quote. Jimmy has just asked how many people are on the call. Well, I think I noted that we peaked at about 112, Jimmy. That was the number I saw. So we did have a fair number of people online, and hopefully everybody got something out of the session this evening. Now, if there's no more questions, or just to thank you, Christian just said thank you. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for coming along this evening. As I said, this is recorded. It will be on the website tomorrow, and we'll also do a summary of the Q&A, or we will update the FAQ if that's not fully covered. So again, thank you very much, Craig, for your presentation this evening. Thank you for coming, everybody. And yes, we will send everybody information who's been involved in the consultation so far, as long as they have provided their contact details. So thank you very much indeed, and have a very good evening. Cheers.